Hello, everyone. My name is Edward Berger, and I'm the director of this movie that you're about to see. It's called Conclave, and I'm so glad that you're turning the audio commentary on. I hope I have some stuff to say that is of interest to you. And now let's watch the movie together. It was a very long journey, probably 5 years of development and financing and trying to cast it and, developing the look of it and assembling the team and the actors and everyone. So hopefully I can tell you all about it. So the movie starts, and it took me a long time to find the beginning of this movie. I'd shot a few other scenes which aren't worth to include on the deleted scene section. It's like Rafe getting a phone call, waking up, the mysteries building, but it just felt like the right thing to just start straight in the movie and have him walk down the street and us not knowing where the hell he's going. He's obviously rushing somewhere. He's a little bit out of breath. So it just felt like the right beginning to start right at it. So I cut a few hours of shooting out of the movie to start with him here. By the way, I'm a total believer in sound. So all those breaths of him, the footsteps of him, that's all post-production, that's all Foley and ADR. I had a session with Rafe, basically watching the movie and listening to it on headphones, and him breathing down the mic and reacting to what he was doing in the film. He saw it for the first time and just breathed the whole film. And a lot of those breaths are in the film because I just think that it gets us closer to him, that it gets us sort of really inside his brain, and that makes it more like a physical experience of us being with him. Because I always like movies where we're in one character's shoes, where we try to take his perspective and live what he or she is living and put the audience into that space. And for that, anything is helpful. First of all, camera. I mean, you see here those shots. It's all Rafe's perspective. Camera slightly above his head. You saw the first one in the lift, slightly above his head, just sort of creep into his brain. I love these slight high angles where you barely see the eyes, but you just see him and you creep into his brain, or slightly behind his ear, sort of a high angle behind his ear. And that sort of is what he's hearing. So sound, the fabric of his robe that he's wearing, or his breath, or the tinker of his cross or something, all that stuff's really important to be in his space and to see the movie through his eyes. And again, here, you have a close-up of him watching what is happening. So obviously I can cut somewhere else, but it always goes back to Rafe and what he sees and feels. And ideally, if you succeed and the movie works for you, then, you can feel with him and experience the death of his beloved colleague there on the bed through his eyes and all his doubts that he expresses throughout the film. I don't know if you've seen the film yet, but there's a big element of doubt in the movie, of doubting if he's in the right space and if he's the right person for the job, if he's the right person being a cardinal. And that is a big element of the film. It's actually the element that made me and Rafe make the movie. On the surface, this is a thriller. A pope dies, and behind closed doors, a political chess game. You see the chess game on the bottom of the right. For me, the movie is a chess game. Political chess game starts. All the different characters like Stanley or John Lithgow or Lucian Musumati or a wonderful actor called Sergio Castellitto from Italy. They all bring themselves into position to win this election. So it's an election drama, but that's only the surface. Behind it, what's much more important to me and Rafe is the journey of doubt that this character goes through, because I could very much relate to, and I think that's what audiences can relate to. None of us are in elections. Very few of us are in election processes or in the church, but all of us go through periods of doubt where we think, what are we doing? Like, why are we doing this? Are we in the right situation in our life? Did we pick the right job? Should we have done something else? No matter whether you're a filmmaker or a baker or a journalist or whatever you do, I think those moments of crisis are all with us. And Rafe is just going through it. So that's what made him make the movie, and that's what made me make the film.
I know this is hard for you, but
So I was talking about perspective earlier. To me, perspective is really important. What was difficult with this film is it's an ensemble piece. You want Rafe to be at the center of it, but still I need to introduce Stanley. I need to introduce John Lithgow. I need to introduce First Conflicts. I need to introduce Lucien Massamati, which is a wonderful actor that just walked in on the left, that guy. So that ensemble needs to be introduced, and that's what this scene was for. And it was a really difficult scene to shoot because there's many people, you see them for the first time, they all need their close-ups. It's a tiny room, actually, this place, and they all stand around a sofa. And ideally, I like to have space for my scenes and just have big rooms and create an architecture where people stand apart. But, in the end, this was a scene where everyone was like crowded around a sofa. And so it was very difficult to introduce everyone, give them space while staying with Rafe and having him at the center of the action. I like this song. It took quite a while in this one to, I made a movie before called All Quiet on the Western Front where same composer. See, again, here, one of those top shots where like slightly above the eye line, looking into Rafe's brain, into what he's thinking. I love those. Anyway, I'm digressing. So I made this movie with Volker Bertelmann, a wonderful composer. And the first cue that he had composed was the one. That's the one that we used. On Conclave, it took a lot longer, a lot of experiments, and finally we found the right tone. This shot is really important for me because it's sort of, I wanted the story to revolve around, we're all the same. The Pope ends up in a body bag in the back of an ambulance. It was interesting to me to juxtapose the archaic with the modern, like archaic because it's the church, it's thousands of years old, but they still have phones and smoke cigarettes and end up in a plastic body bag.
Security say they like to test the electronic jammers one last time, Your Eminence.
I better be quick. Is this really necessary, Willie?
Apparently so. They say...
You see this shot as a Steadicam shot, and later on when we're back in the Sistine Chapel, I cut a lot. because it was more important with the look. So we felt it was important here to have one long uninterrupted Steadicam shot, to have a different look in the Sistine Chapel, because they're still preparing. It's not set up yet. So it's a very different feeling here to later when we're back here. And everything, I think this might be interesting to you. Obviously, we didn't shoot in the Sistine Chapel. We shot in Cinecittà, in a wonderful studio outside of Rome. And everything beyond the line there's a line like 5 meters high above Rafe's head, basically. That's CGI. So we couldn't build the entire studio. I can tell you a little bit more later when we're back in the studio about how that was done, but only the first 5 meters were built and the rest is digital extension.
Ray, tell him that I will see him after I've met the cardinals. The poor fellow will be worrying about his future.
With Isabella Rossellini, she has a very silent part in the movie. And so I needed an actress that has an aura, that has charisma, that can be without saying anything. She's relegated to the back seats of this organization because that's what women are in the church, in the Catholic Church at least. They can't become leaders. They can't become priests. They can't become, the Pope will always be a man, at least right now. And cardinals will be men, and nuns are relegated to the back seats. So I needed someone who has sort of a presence without saying anything. And who comes to mind but Isabella? And she was wonderful as a person and as an actress. I was so glad that we got her. You see here, people smoking. I love that. Guy on the phone and their suitcases and so forth. I just liked, and here the X-ray. I always liked that in the script. Some of it was in the script. It just felt like this juxtaposition of plastic and thick fabric and all the Catholic shenanigans that are thousands of years old. Just felt like an important, cigarettes on the floor felt like an important thing to use. So let me go back to the script, maybe, because I touched on it in the beginning of our conversation here. So Tessa Ross, the producer, was a wonderful producer from England, biggest heart you could imagine. Such a great collaboration with her. She sent me an early draft of the script about 5-6 years ago, and I truly enjoyed it because Peter Strawn, who wrote it, I'd been an admirer of his for many years. Because whenever I read a script of his, it was never about the story only. It had a great story. He wrote Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, for example, which is a great film. And I'll tell you a little bit about that in a minute. So whenever I read a script of his, I felt like, he's just deeply soulful. Underneath the story, there's a second layer, in this case, the layer of doubt for Rafe, that is just human and has a soul. Of course, there are action movies where it's just plot and so forth. This is obviously not an action movie, so you need like the second layer and a reason why we make the movie, a reason why it's in the world, why we put our heart into it. This takes, I told you, it takes 5-6 years to make it, financing and everything. So you need to have year in and year out. You need to have a super passion to make it. Otherwise, you just lose interest and the movie won't become good. And that core essence, that heart, is Peter. He brings it to the film, to the writing. And if it's in the writing, you can put it in the movie. If it's not there, you'll never be able to put it there. So it was a great process. I love both of them dearly, and we spent a few years developing the script. It was in great shape when I got it because Peter is a brilliant writer, but we tried to make it, hone it, change it to current events, make it more modern. It's weird how the times change quickly and single lines or single scenes become superfluous or slightly focus it. And whenever an actor read the script, listened to their thoughts and incorporate them and try to make the movie better. And that sometimes takes a long time. And we had the financing fall apart once and needed to remount it. And then I didn't have time. And then, we found Rafe, and Rafe didn't have time in the fall, but needed to shoot it in the spring. So time goes by. And now from the script to cast, because I was very, very blessed with a wonderful cast, starting with Rafe. And you always want to start with your number one. Number one is the highest person on the call sheet, and that is Rafe Fiennes. And so each actor gets a number, and Rafe Fiennes is number one because he's in every scene, as you see. And so I sent him the script, and he, luckily, I'm so blessed with it, that he responded, and he immediately wanted to meet. It took like maybe a week after I sent it to him for him to respond. And then a few weeks for us to arrange a meeting. I went to see, with Tessa Ross, the producer, we went to see a play of his in London, and then went to dinner, and it was 10:30 at night already. And so the restaurant turned on their lights. Basically, we were too late to eat, had a drink, and talked about the script. Not so long, maybe 45 minutes, an hour. And then he said, I'd love to do it. And the main question was, first of all, chemistry between us. Do we like each other? Will we get along? Are we going to trust each other? That's the main hurdle, I think. As an actor, I could imagine it's the most difficult thing. I'm not an actor, so I don't know, but I just imagine that this is, they need to bare themselves, make themselves utterly vulnerable and expose themselves, get naked, basically, in front of the camera, not literally, but figuratively. So they need to really have utter faith that you're not going to screw up who they inhabit in this film. First of all, you can disagree on performance and you can edit it wrongly. So many things can go wrong in a movie. And as an actor, especially with experience like Rafe, I'm sure it's a huge hurdle to jump and say, I can trust this person. And same as vice versa. You could end up with a person that you don't get along with as a director. They could sabotage your movie by not doing what you think it is. And so you need to have a vision. You need to see eye to eye when you make the film. And you need to basically, want to make the same movie. And one of the big questions that Rafe asked me in that meeting, I think later, on a phone call later, he asked me, by the way, I reread the script, and what are you interested in? Are you interested in me as a detective, the detective story? Or are you interested in the journey, the doubt that I go through? And I said, it's obvious an actor always wants it to be about the character's arc. But in this case, that's what I wanted it to be about, the inner journey that Rafe goes through, that arc that he embarks on. And so I think he was very relieved because, I think there was a moment of doubt after he said yes so quickly. And there was a moment of doubt. Life takes over. It gets stressful. The other offers come in, and probably he doubted whether it's the right film. And then he just wanted reassurance from me that we're going to make the same movie. And so that was that phone conversation. I think I put him at ease, and turns out we wanted to make the same movie. And you'll see in the movie, other actors, even of the caliber of Stanley, get one close-up per scene, if even. I don't always shoot close-ups for the scenes, but let's say here in this scene, Rafe will get 3, because every time his thought or the dynamic of the scene changes, I'm going to change the angle of the camera to underline what he's feeling or what he's thinking. And there's only one, for each moment in a scene, there's only one camera position. And so to me, it's very important where that is, that it's not haphazard and that you put it in the right place. For me, any department, starting with writing, directing, camera, production design, costume, music, sound design, it's all there to serve whatever the character is feeling at any given moment in their stomach. I know it sounds a bit heady. I don't know how else to explain it. The camera has to be in a position to underline, to explain, to make the audience feel whatever the character is feeling. That's the task of all departments, in my opinion, on a movie. Don't take yourself too seriously. You're not the most important part of the equation. Everything is equally important, and everything is there to visualize the feeling of a character. This is an interesting actor, Carlos Diaz. He lives in Canada. He lives in Vancouver. He plays Cardinal Benitez here, who gives the sermon in Spanish. He's never acted before in a movie. We needed someone, for reasons that will become obvious later at the end of the film, we needed someone who is very sensitive and sensible and quiet and calm, but confident, who doesn't come from the so-called Western country like America or England or Europe, or who is from a more marginalized community and who's especially unknown, because we needed him to be as surprising to the cardinals. He shows up being voted for, being made a cardinal in pectoris, like so secretly by the Pope. No one knew about him. So I wanted him to be sort of a surprise to everyone, to all the cardinals, as well as the audience. And there's a turn in the events later. If it had been a known actor, first of all, you would see it coming. You see it coming anyway. You kind of assume that this guy is going to be interesting. Anyone who's seen movies before knows this person is going to be like play some kind of role in the proceedings here. But if it's a star or someone we know from a television show or something, then there's more focus on it. And I wanted him to disappear and the cardinals be surprised. But this guy, Sergio Castellito, he's wonderful. First of all, he's very funny. And see, this joke here, he made it up. When he speaks about everyone sort of sitting at their tables, he says Italians sit over there, Africans sit there, English over there, whatever. Francese, the French guys behind him, because there's obviously, so Francese is from him, and I find it very funny because there's obviously a wonderfully good competition or like animosity between Italian and French because they're neighboring countries and probably have been at war 500 times over the last however many years, and it has a wonderful self-irony to it. So Italian actors don't, sorry to generalize, but Italian actors, older actors don't speak English very well. There's a handful of them. I only found 2 or 3 above the age of 60 or 70. So we tried to make it a virtue by having Sergio speak a lot of Italian and Rafe learning a lot of Italian.
was shrewd of him to stay away from Rome.
Jumping to this shot, first of all, this location, I really was happy to find it. I love the red among the green seats and us being able to light it the way we light it. And then this is a good example of what I tried to learn from Alan J. Pakula and his movies, the 70s conspiracy thrillers. You see the slow zoom in, a long zoom in, not cutting. I don't know. How long is the shot? 40 seconds, 50, a minute? I don't know. And they're just talking and everything plays out in this way. First of all, I find it very, when movies do that, find it very cinematic. Let your eyes edit it. You know, your eyes will adjust to the pace of the edit and you go shift from eyes to eyes. You see this on the screen and it's big enough. You know, your eyes can wander. And then secondly, Alan Pakula in his movies like Clute or Parallax View or All the President's Men, that was a big inspiration for this because the so-called 70s political conspiracy thrillers obviously shaped, influenced by the times of Nixon and Watergate, and there was a lot of paranoia and mistrust towards everyone, and Vietnam War and everything. All those elements in America led to these films that to me are super inspiring, and those films captured the mood of the society so well. And if you watch Pakula's films, they're often with Warren Beatty, and you have this megastar in the 70s in the US, and you have a 3-minute scene in Parallax View, and he does like 2 edits. And for 2 minutes, Warren Beatty's with his back to the camera in the dark, and it doesn't even get a close-up. And at the end of it, you have like 10 seconds or 20 seconds, you cut to a mid-shot of him, how he reacts. And it's so intriguing. The pace is so slow, and yet it's never boring. And you get a feeling of precision. And can't quite do that maybe today anymore. It's different times, and people have changed how they perceive films and so forth. But I try to be inspired by that.
Who are undecided. So,
I'm sorry to have to ask.
Look at this scene, for example. I mean, I never use a shot twice. Maybe at the very end I use this again. And the shots hold, it starts at 17 seconds. Let's see how long the shot goes. I mean, usually I'd cut only when the dynamic of the scene changes.
So there isn't any truth in the allegation.
Oh, God, no, of course not. It's absurd. You don't think that...
Oh, well, I had to ask.
I understand. But
It's quite deliberate edit of this movie. If you keep watching it, it's quite slow, the edit. The talking hopefully isn't slow, but, we stay on shots for a long time and really cut only when it changes. Here, the dynamic changes. Rafe is slowly digging in, so we go a bit closer, and we stay on him. John Lithgow stays off camera for a long time. Rafe has many sentences off camera, and that is more Alan J. Bakula than anyone else, who did it much more extreme than this. Like, he stayed much longer. But still, I think in movies today, it's quite rare that you hold shots for this long. And to me, it just creates much more of a feeling of being able to rest your face on actors' faces and get into their headspace and just stay with them, be with them and understand
it's affecting
what they mean.
his mind, even. The poor man.
And here on Poor Man, we cut to this, just because this is how Ray feels.
Again, Joe, my apologies.
No, not at all. I completely understand.
But you'll see it maybe in another scene that's quite, especially dialogue scenes, we stay on one side much longer than usual, I would think. Much more often we go back and forth 3-4 times in these exchanges, and we just go back once because it's enough, I think. It's lovely to stay with people for 30 seconds and just see what they do and give the actor space to develop their performance.
Good night.
We start talking about locations a little bit. So this is built. Everything was on location, but we built this hallway and we built the Sistine Chapel because we couldn't find a hallway, believe it or not. We shot in Rome. Rome is the most beautiful city on earth. I thought like I owe my crew a nicer location than trenches and the mud and the freezing cold in Eastern Europe in the winter for 6 months. So I thought, let's all go to Rome and have nice dinner. So it was still winter because Rafe's schedule and the story takes place in the winter. It's much nicer. I think it's much more interesting than Rome in the summer. It's too beautiful. A little bit bleaker here and a little bit colder. Everything feels more oppressive to me. So I was glad that we shot this in winter. We built this location because we couldn't find the rooms, the bathroom here, or the suites, the cardinal suites, and the hallway. We built it because I really want locations to be symmetrical and, I don't know, just interesting. And we couldn't find that in Rome. I mean, you find everything in Rome, but you couldn't find long, interesting hallways. They were surprisingly white and plain. And so, or you couldn't do enough to them, couldn't really change them to adapt them and make them visually interesting. So we just built this hallway right next to the Sistine Chapel. We didn't have a big stage at Cinecittà, which is wonderful to shoot in because you have big Fellini stage right next door and great filmmakers shooting there currently. And, but also you feel the history of, you probably have, 30, 40 great Italian directors. 50 more, you can't even count them, that there's so many. Rossellini, Fellini, Antonioni, Visconti, De Sica, and now in Italy you have Luca Guadagnini and Paolo Sorrentino and Alice Rohrwacher and all these great filmmakers, Matteo Garona. I mean, it's endless, the Emanuele Crialese, and so it's endless to count, And all these filmmakers shot and are shooting in Cinecittà, and you feel it in the walls. And that's great. I mean, it's a really inspiring environment to make a movie. I hope I get to go back there and make a film. And and next door is Fellini, and there's a plaque, the Fellini stage, and there's a big plaque on the door and it says the real home of Federico Fellini wasn't his house. It was Stage 5 on Cinecittà because he spent a lot of his time there and shot all of his movies there and so forth.
In questo momento di grande incertezza nella storia della Santa Chiesa.
You saw us close the doors at when was this? Maybe minute 20 of the film, 15. The windows shut, the doors close. So hopefully this movie feels a bit oppressive and people are locked in, a bit claustrophobic. You're just, locked away and like it's contained. It's in one place. Hopefully it feels like that. All the locations belong together and are homogeneous and so forth. You wouldn't believe the amount of locations we shot this in. This is a location. The hallway outside where he gets dressed is a different location. It's just very difficult for me because you can't access the Vatican. There's a big white line on the floor in St. Peter's Square where it says no cameras beyond this point, and then you can't film in there. So you need to recreate everything. So every room needs to have a meaning and needs to feel like it somehow belongs to the Vatican and belongs to one place. I look for locations forever. Anyway, most of the film, to me, is done in prep. Casting, 90% of directing is casting. Someone said, I think someone like Sidney Pollack or someone like that said it, or Sidney Lumet. I think it was Sidney Lumet in this case, and who's also a great 1970s. He made a few of those films, those very precise films. And to me, that's casting, and just as important as casting is finding the right location. You feel it when you go in, you say, this place has the right architecture, I know how to shoot it. Just see how long this shot holds on Rafe. It just doesn't cut to anyone else. This is his story. This is his speech. This is his, main speech. This is what he feels. This is what he thinks, and he verbalizes it. And it just doesn't cut because first of all, his performance is great. And I don't want to cut away. I want to look into his eyes. I want to look into his face. I want to lose myself in his face, and only then see how people react and see that this speech didn't land well. It's animosity. There's two fronts. Like there's Cardinals watching and there's him. They're on two sides. There's a turning point in the movie. And so to get lost in his face, the way he loses himself in his thoughts was really important to me. This is a different location. This is all these places are different. So it's a real big puzzle piece. And to me, 90% of the making of the film is preparation. And then you just have to shoot it. And that comes with all its problems and hurdles and difficulties. But hopefully, if you're well prepped, you overcome those. So locations, you walk in, you think, I could shoot this way here. It feels right. I just have to single out this fabric here. Big story behind it. My costume designer, Lizzie Crystal, who is a genius, who I've made 4 or 5 movies now together, and I never, ever want to make one without her. So she designed these robes. And I met her first on All Quiet, and she came to me. And I just wanted to show you that fabric there, that close-up, and you feel how the richness of the color and the fabric, and it just feels so delicious. I want to wrap myself up. Actually, I want to have that robe and put it on. So I met her first on All Quiet, and she said, you might wonder why a costume designer wants to do a movie with uniforms, because in our minds, they all look the same, just like Cardinals, another uniform movie. And then she sort of took out images for each character in the movie and said, this is why I want to make the movie, because this is the biggest challenge to tell character. While they all have uniforms, they're all individually different. Someone's going to wear a sweater that their mom knitted. Someone's going to wear this, and someone's 3 years, 4 years in the war already, so his costume is more aged, it feels differently, and he wears it differently because he knows more the tricks, he knows the functionality, he wears this poncho over his head when it rains because he's figured it out, how it works. So through these details, she was able to give each character a wonderful inner life and a different feeling. Same with these costumes. Sergio Castelliti, you saw earlier, had a big red coat on, feeling very ostentatious. He's a show-off, and others are almost more Protestant. Richard Rafe would be a bit more Protestant, quieter in his attire and take it more back. But this fabric, there's an interesting story behind this fabric that she picked. Let me park that for a minute. I'm so sorry, because we're in the Sistine Chapel for the first time, and I want to talk about that a little bit before I come back to the fabric. So these Sistine Chapel scenes, see that line above the door in the shot where he closes the door, that wasn't there. Maybe a meter or two wasn't there, but everything beyond that is extended. This is all real. So we obviously try to make most of the shots not have too much CGI because, believe it or not, our budget was quite limited. We had to be very judicious where we put our money. And so this shot is all real. There's no CG in there. But as soon as we go wider, And most of it is extended. This is all real. I hope there's a shot coming. I can show you that. Yeah, that, everything on the left and right above that line and everything above the door in the back is extended. That was blue screen. There on the upper right of the frame is blue screen, so that's extended. And all of this frame is real. We shot it for real. So big build. You see again this top shot here on Rafe creeping into his brain. What is he thinking? Who's he going to vote for? This shot, you'll see everything is extended above, looking up at the ceiling. So that all wasn't there. And it's wonderful, the miracle that now these CG houses, these VFX houses can do and make it feel so real and authentic. So Italy, our partners there had put this set in storage in the hope to rent it out one day, and they did rent it to us. And they were also our producers in Italy, so wonderful partners. But you take it out of storage, most of the wall had sort of deteriorated. So everything needed to be basically rebuilt and be repainted. The skeleton was there, but we repainted it. And in Italy, they have the most wonderful painters, artisans who can design these sets. Watch here how I try to be precise and judicious with my edits and my shots and the looks. Obviously, the dynamic between all the contestants, including Rafe, Stanley, John Lithgow, Lucien Massamati, Sergio Castellito, and in the end, our newbie, Carlos Diaz. It needs to be judicious, the way you shoot them, the way you introduce them. I try to be precise and not have like sort of documentary handheld, let's see what we can catch.
Cardinale Bellini.
See, this is one shot on Benitez, again from Rafe's perspective. So I sat with Stéphane Fontaine, our wonderful DP, for about 8 weeks to shotlist the film. And then I sat down with the storyboard artist to storyboard these Sistine Chapel scenes. Because to me, we have about 5 elections, 5 votes. And I was really afraid that they'd get boring as hell or repetitive.
Altri cardinali che hanno ricevuto un solo voto, 31 voti.
Poiché nessun candidato ha ottenuto la maggioranza necessaria di 70.
Now, see again this shot and all the extensions there, the digital extensions. So I was very afraid that this would get boring or repetitive. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to need to draw these so that every election feels different. Every election is a progression from the last. We introduce a new element. We make it feel, new, just different. And that it becomes sort of its own piece. And now, watching the movie, I never enjoy watching my own movies because I've seen them 700 times. And after 700 times, they tend to get repetitive, as you can imagine. But the element that I think that I would say I'm most content with are the elections. And because I find them tense. Nothing is said. Anyway, there were big doubts in my head about all the dialogue in the movie. There's so much dialogue in the movie, and that's a part of the reason why I also made it, because All Quiet had almost no dialogue. People were saying, I'm hungry. That was the extent of the dialogue we had, and then a few small scenes. And because I like that, and when I write myself, I can't write good dialogue. I mean, I'm much better in just sort of showing the process of what people do and showing simple dialogues rather than dialogues like this, where things are sort of debated and discussed, and Peter Strawn is a much better writer for that. And so he had written this. But when you shoot this, especially after a movie like All Quiet, where you have literally very little to no dialogue. I mean, I had weeks without dialogue on All Quiet. And suddenly on a movie set, and all you do is shoot dialogue, you start thinking, my God, is anyone going to listen to these words? Not in the first week, not in the second week, but in the third week, it starts creeping in. So there's a really, again, theme of doubt. While making a movie, the hardest thing is to continue to stick with it, to remember the way you read the script the first time innocently, forget all the 800 times that you've discussed it with your crew members, that you've read it with your cast, that you've storyboarded it. Try to forget it and say, like, how did it feel when I first read it? And that to preserve that innocence is super difficult, because you remember, wow, I did this movie because I liked the script. And now I'm just worried that, I'm hearing this dialogue for the 12th time because of 12 takes and different angles and so forth. And you shoot this week in and week out. You just start getting worried that this might not be interesting. The important lesson for me was here to just stick with it and just to say, like, okay, I gotta continue believing in it and just shoot it the way I originally thought it should be filmed. Without ignoring that on the day, I mean, I'm a big planner. I storyboarded the election scenes. I shortlisted everything because I want to have a plan. But then on the day, what I usually do is I say, okay, Rafe, let's rehearse this. What do you want to do? You're sitting on this bed, or this is the path you're walking on, in this case with Carlos Diaz, and this is how the dialogue takes place. And then I rehearse it with them. And then I realize, oh, this is the way Rafe plays it. Meaning, I'm going to need another shot for this. I'm going to need to film it differently than I originally thought I'd need to shoot it, because his acting is different. He brings a different emotionality, a different energy to it. So you need to shoot it faster. You need to shoot it slower. You need a different angle to creep into his brain. There's only so much you can plan in your room with your DP. You sit at the table, you're imagining the way they play it. And then the wonderful thing is, actors come and they bring their personality to the movie, and the movie suddenly becomes different and richer, and every human brings something new to the movie and brings their personality to the film, and you need to embrace that, because I truly believe that you can't change humans. You can't tell Stanley you need to play it like Marlon Brando, because he isn't. Or you need to play it more like Rafe. Stanley is not Rafe, and he will play it differently. And you can change little things to a degree, but you can't change the inherent core or soul, heart, whatever you want to call it, of a person. And you need to embrace it. You need to be clear when casting, when bringing the crew members together. Everyone's going to have their own personality and influence the movie. And if you fight that, I don't think the movie has a chance of becoming good. But if you embrace it while bending it in your direction and hopefully guiding it so that everyone pulls in once, then I think you have a chance to make it that it resonates with others, with our audience. Rafe and Stanley are wonderful. In casting, I started with Rafe. As soon as I had Rafe, I started casting the people around him, starting with Stanley, because I would say he's number two. He's the second most important actor in this ensemble. And so I looked for him. I looked for, the Italian. I looked for Isabella. I looked for, obviously, the Benitez, the Cardinal. That took the longest to find because he's unknown, and we looked the world over. But the dynamic between Stanley and Rafe is great because they're friends. They're great. They love each other. They really respect each other. But they're such different actors. In that scene that you just saw, they were both felt like suddenly like, why is this scene taking so long, or why is it difficult to shoot? I think because they have so much respect for each other that suddenly is, even if they don't want to, they're competing, they're combating. They want to impress the other. Rafe wants to, I don't know, he probably will say it's total crap, what I'm saying, but Rafe wants to be good for Stanley and wants to be, in a way, better. Or say, like, he wants to have the respect of the other and say, like, Rafe thinks I'm a good actor. He thinks it anyway, but deep down inside, insecurity is coming, and deep down inside, you want to be good. You want to be as good or better than the other. And so they were kind of little battling each other. It was very subtle, but underneath it was there. And Rafe is an actor who prepares meticulously. His Italian is meticulous here. He rehearsed and wanted to do another take to get the pronunciation right. He rehearsed his Latin like a maniac. Stanley shows up. And by the way, you see everything on Rafe's face. I cast him also because he's someone where you can see what's going on behind the eyes. He doesn't have the most lines in this movie. He actually has probably the least of all the Cardinals. And he's listening a lot. He's watching a lot. He's thinking a lot. So I needed an actor that can express what he's thinking, what's going on behind his eyes, that takes us into their soul. And Rafe came to mind because he's such a vulnerability when he wants to, without showing it off and really hiding it, but you somehow see it in the eyes and see what he's thinking. You're just with him, and so he takes us in, and he's such a dedicated actor. He's actually an actor that taught me so much about acting, because if he wouldn't have this, again, he'd probably protest this, so don't play this for him, but if he wouldn't have this, he'd basically die. He needs it. He needs it to survive. He needs it to live. It's total fulfillment. And that's what he taught me. Like, what a dedication, what a craft, what an absolute belief in this job is. So he has that, and you see it in his eyes. Everything he works for it. He thinks it through. He's such an intelligent person. And Stanley does the same. I'm 100% sure, but he doesn't show it. He jokes around. You've seen his shows. His personality is just 180 degrees different. He jokes around. He comes. He does a take. I say, "Oh, that was fine. Let's move on." And where Ray would want another one, Stanley would just go, "It doesn't really matter. Let's just move on." Whatever that is. And again, there's constant worries while you make a movie. Is it good enough? Am I getting what I need? And I said this to Stanley, so I can share this with you. While we were shooting, I was worried that maybe he wasn't doing enough. In fact, Stanley himself, on like the third last shooting day or so, suddenly said, "Oh my God," I suddenly had this total panic that I'm too American, too loose, that all of you are proper Cardinals, and I'm just this American guy who doesn't quite fit in the movie. And I said, "Don't worry, you're great, and it's such a great ensemble, and you perfectly fit in." But underneath it, I had the same worry that Stanley was just, not the Americanness, but Stanley wasn't doing enough almost, because I couldn't see it on set, what he was doing. I saw that he was great, but I couldn't see behind his eyes, like with Rafe, because with Rafe it's so much more, and I also gave Rafe more close-ups. But when I saw it, until I came into the edit room, and I suddenly saw, oh my God, it's all there. He did it, and he was just hiding it. And he's such a wonderful miracle of an actor. And in the rare cases, you have these in film actors where you think they're not doing anything, and actually they're doing everything. And they know how powerful the camera is and how much the camera sees. If you have an actor like that, like Stanley, just trust him. Just trust him and hand it over to him and or her. And even if you don't see it on set, it's suddenly in the movie. It's true magic. And only certain film actors have it. And I felt terrible about, I felt like an absolutely insensitive klutz of a director not having seen it on set and having had these worries and then suddenly discovering it in the room. Until I read a great interview with Christopher Nolan that the same thing happened to him with Al Pacino. And then I thought, well, if it happens to Christopher Nolan, it's okay if it happens to me. I don't have to feel that bad. So Stanley is a miracle of an actor whose full extent of emotion you only discover in the edit. You see it on film, you don't see it live. The next scene is a scene between Lucien Musumati and Ray Fiennes, where Lucien is the front runner now in the election, and the scene unravels him, and he does it beautifully, I think. It was this big scene for him. It's his major scene. Basically, after this, he's kind of sidelined because he reveals something of his past that's going to make him be unfit for the papacy. And so Lucien is just wonderful, the way he plays this and the way he falls apart. And there's such pressure on these scenes that you do within, you have I don't know, what do you have for this? 5 hours, maybe 4 hours. And you have to get it right. And you have only one day, this one try. And if you don't get it, then you'll never get it again. So it's, for me, always like a big nerve-wracking thing, and I'm sure for Lucien as well in this case. You know, you have one shot at it. And it's not like a painting where you can, the next day you think, oh, you know what, it's terrible. Let's throw it away. Let's do it again, or let's paint over it. This is like, you have this one shot, and it's a really nerve-wracking thing because you're on a schedule and you never want to show to anyone that it's nerve-wracking or there's pressure. But to me, it's always like the fear of failure, of not getting it is massive on days where you go, okay, this is Lucien's scene. It's his arc. It's his big moment. I'm going to need to get it. And Well, let's let this settle for a moment. Yeah, I think he's wonderful in this scene.
We were very young.
No, Josh. She was very young. She was 19 years old.
I'm too impatient to be quiet. You can watch the movie another time. But so, just look at the costume. I wanted to get back to the costume. Lucien isn't wearing a cross. It somehow makes him feel more naked, more bare. Rafe is wearing his cross, the band around his neck where the cross is suspended on. And it's a big difference. And these small, subtle things is what makes Lizzie a master in costume design for me. And so she discovered this fabric and showed it to me, and I immediately thought, wow, it's beautiful. Love the color, love the richness. And it's actually not the way Cardinals costumes look today. It's more old-fashioned. It's more inspired by what they used to look like, but it's its own design. We could have gone to any costume shop and rented. In fact, the young Pope probably had 80, 90 Cardinals costumes sitting in the closet, and the production was like, why don't you use those? Those are the real Cardinals costumes. We said, no, we're not going to use them. And it's a huge fight because it's a big item in the budget. And when you don't have money, then those things will get contested. But as I love Lizzie so much, and as I trust her so much, and as I didn't like what the Cardinals are actually wearing today because it looks a little bit cheap, their robes looked so much better. They should actually copy our design, I think, because these look so much more beautiful than what they're wearing. We made these, 150 robes or more, probably 200, because obviously we made them for archbishops too and others, and priests, and everything's handmade. This was inspired by the 70s conspiracy thrillers Pecula, A Big Idol. You see the intercutting of the kind of montagey intercutting of Lucien and Rafe here with Lucien's demise. And as I said, we had many, many elections and I didn't want them to be repetitive. So I thought, okay, how do the characters feel at this point? And now especially how does Lucien feel? Well, they're all isolated and they're all alone, and Lucien feels and is left alone, and people are abandoning him. So we did a very simple thing, which you see in a second. Reading the results here.
Cardinale Tremblay, 40 voti. Cardinale Tedesco, 34
I love how he
voti.
smokes his vape here.
Cardinale Bellini, 13 voti. Cardinale Lawrence.
So,
11
as you
voti.
see, they're all alone in the vote, and especially Lucien is alone. They all get mid-shot, and Lucien is the only one who gets wide shots, just to underline how all his votes have. It's a landslide, like they've gone. Everyone has abandoned him. And that, to me, is very much the language of it. Also, the zoom here, the slow zoom out, is the language of Pecula, if you go rewatch his movies.
Le votazioni riprenderanno domani mattina.
Anything else?
Again, see here the digital extensions of the Sistine Chapel.
He was issued a round-trip ticket to Geneva paid for by the Pope's own.
Brian O'Byrne is a wonderful actor from Ireland who brings a slightly comedic tone to his performance here. That pause, I think he did beautifully. And yeah, he always brings a slightly comedic tone to his performance in the entire piece. I'm so thankful for that because it lightens up a theoretically heavy proceeding. So him and Sergio are sort of the humorous ones, which I'm grateful for. I made a movie once where I was somehow carried away and it was just too serious and it just becomes overbearing and you can't continue. So now, learning from that, whenever I have the opportunity for a smile, for laughter, for a joke, I'll go for it. Because as you know, you can't bear life when it becomes too heavy and too serious. So you just need to make fun of it.
Well, this is really nice.
Again, new location. So it feels hopefully like the hallway or the staircase of this house, but everything is puzzled together and pieced together. And this was a location we found in a military school in Rome.
Now, I don't know if you've continued to do so, but if you have, then I must repeat my plea to you.
So I'll get back to the fabrics. So I knew we were in trouble because Rave is a very authentic realist. He wants to play how it is. And the interesting thing is we don't always know how it is because the conclave takes place behind closed doors. It's just locked, and cardinals that take place there won't tell you because they're not allowed to. It's a vow of silence. We can make assumptions, but we don't know everything. There's a lot of research that went into the book, that went into the script, a lot of research that went into the art design and the directing and everything. But still, at a certain extent, people won't tell you. And so there was a challenge. But I always believe the movie has to feel real. But I used to sort of believe that dogma and you film everything and it has to be true, truthful and so forth. I steered away from that. I'm now in love with the manufacturing of shots, how every department, how every craft can go into creating shots and influencing shots and making it as good as can be and creating a reality. And so to me, it was important that we created a reality here that feels real, but it's not necessarily real. This house here, this room that Rafe is sitting in, one of the suites or where the cardinals live, we built it, as I said. And the real Casa Santa Marta, you Google it, it's where the cardinals are sequestered. It's ugly. It's basically unshootable. And so you need to create an environment that feels real and the way you imagine it, but it doesn't have to be real. It's interesting to me if it bends the reality, if it's an imagined reality. And so sometimes I had to coax Rafe to get to accepting that we're not shooting reality, that we're creating a reality. I mean, look at Star Wars. It feels real, but of course none of it is real. But I dive into it and go like, oh, this is a world that I embrace as real. And I want to be taken by the filmmaker, by the director, into a world that they take me by the hand, they carry me away into a realm that I have no idea about. And that's what Star Wars does. And that's hopefully what you do in every movie. You go to a movie and the time changes. And the perception of time, the way you feel in the movie, you suddenly come out and suddenly realize, oh, wow, I've been to a different world. So to get to the point, the fabric. Rafe went to visit a cardinal in England. And at some point, the cardinal said, come to me in the next room. He went to the next room. A robe was laid out on a bed. And he said, put it on. And Rafe put it on and it looked wonderful on him. And he sent me a picture proudly. And I knew we were in trouble because, any actor that, costume is such a big part and they go into it and they feel at home and they slowly make it part of their character and they grow into this character. And I saw it in Rafe's picture and his happy smile that he was growing into this thing. And they just said, oh, wow, I get to wear this costume. I get to wear to be a cardinal. And I had to call him and say, this is not the costume we're going to do. We're going to do a different costume. And he was like, why? Why would you do that? I mean, they're there. I mean, they're... I said, because I think it's more of creating this reality than rather having the real reality and making it look more coherent with the rest of the movie. And it's a feeling, And for that, you have to trust your cast or your crew members. And Lizzie is one of my closest collaborators. I trust her and I didn't like those other cardinal robes. In fact, when I watched The Young Pope, one of the big things, I go like, oh, I wish the cardinal's robes were a bit richer. So we took this richer fabric. And then Rafe put this on. And Rafe was deeply unhappy, I think, with the costume and felt like it's thick, it's heavy, and it's not the real thing. And I remember on the day one, he showed up and saw it in his face that he was wearing something that he didn't quite know how to wear yet. And then he grew into it. But once in a while, he had to take a jab and say, like, this thick fabric, I'm hot under it, like. He was craving to have the real thing. But other actors like Sergio was like, I love my costume because you know what? It feels like a cardinal's costume. Look at them, how beautiful that red is, in this shot, in this long creep in on John Lithgow and Rafe. That red you would never have gotten with the other costume. It's more orange. Just look at it. It's not pretty. And so Sergio or John or Stanley, they all embraced it and they just loved that you didn't just go to a costume rental house and said, I need 80 or 150 Cardinals costumes, please, right now. And you just get them. But you make it feel like a Cardinals costume, but it's a little off to the side and it's a bit different. And it's just its own design. And that was important to me and to Lizzie. And I'm so glad we did it because every time I see it, it makes the shot. It does make the shot. It does elevate it. It does make it richer. Should talk about my collaboration with the wonderful, incomparable Stéphane Fontaine, the DOP, who's a beautiful person. He's just a very intuitive cameraman from France. He shot movies like Un Prophète, A Prophet by Jacques Audiard, a great French movie, or Rust and Bones, or Jackie, he shot with Natalie Portman by Pablo Larraín. She's a really great Academy Award nominated TOP. He's very intuitive, and that is his strength. He's great with handheld camera. He's great with composition. But I was speaking earlier about embracing who people are in cast, in acting, but also in crew. And with Stefan, it was the most obvious because I'm a real sucker. I'm a real believer in symmetry and shots. I want to be straight behind them. I want to be, look at this symmetry, left and right. You have the lamps. In fact, it's not quite symmetrical, but it should be. But I love symmetry in shots. Kubrick, I love Kubrick films, the way he's symmetrical. I just love the composition of it. I'll show you a shot later where it's really interesting. Sometimes I had this idea of a shot and I lined it up with Stefan, said, okay, camera should be here and it's straight and symmetrical and so forth. And then I would walk away and Stefan, yeah, great, that's fantastic. And I would walk away and do something with the actors or, I don't know, set design or something, or have a sandwich and coffee. And I'd come back and the camera was in a different place. It was off to one side. And Stefan, why don't you go symmetrical? Like in a very nice way, And he said, "Oh, I tried it. It just didn't feel right." And I said, "Show it to me." And so he went back to the place that we had thought it should be, and I saw it, and he was right. It didn't feel right, and I realized that he's just not the symmetrical person. Sometimes he is, but he goes by the actor. He looks at the actors and goes like, "Well, they're standing there, so camera should be off to one side to." I don't know, to put them at the center or to put them off to one side, but somehow his stomach, his intuition is not symmetrical. He's just much more composed in a different way. And I realized with him, symmetry is not going to work. It's going to feel imposed by me. And the shot off to the side just looked much better that he had composed. Like here. This is off to the side. It's not symmetrical, that long hallway. It just looked better. And so that was an important realization that basically it's such a collaboration. You drive the entire look and the coherence of it, but it's really important to embrace the crew. It's a partnership. I like that, by the way, that opening of the closet, just that little thing, like, again, papal cassocks in plastic. That contrast is weaved throughout the film. To me, that's important. Here, the glasses in the second, the glasses on the thing, you've seen them before, with the thermometer, the fever thermometer behind it. It's just like mundane stuff. And the glasses are taped, so the fever thermometer. So this guy's human. He's flesh and blood. He was flesh and blood. And the strip bed, it's also transient. We all end up in a body bag. In scenes like this, with actors having to bear all their emotion, I think it's really important to basically do one take, maybe two, because how many times can you do that? Coordinate with the actor. And with Rafe, I went to, of course, you go up to him and say, when do you want to shoot this? Tell me when you want to do it. Yeah. Usually you start with a wide shot first, with this shot from behind. But in that case, I just went to Rafe and said, which shot do you want to shoot first? And I think we did the close-up maybe second, or so, maybe a mid-shot first. And maybe we even did the close-up first just to get it out of the way. Because it's exhausting for an actor to have to think, oh, God, I'm going to have to cry and I'm going to have to do it 10 times. And I think you feel really depleted at the end. So the camera we shot this on was the Red Raptor. I usually don't shoot on red, but again, this was great DOPs and great directors shoot on red. Like, I mean, the most well-known one, I would say, is Fincher, probably. So it's just a question of taste. But Stefan is a big red fan. And so he brought the red with him. And the lenses are Tribe 7s, which I love. I absolutely love. Beautiful lenses. Bradford Young designed. Yeah, just great lenses that I'm a big fan of. By the way, I like close-ups. I don't like changing lenses throughout the scene. I think this scene, my guess would be, we shot it all on the 37. Maybe the wide shot in the end, because the room is too small. We probably did a 17 or 20.7. I don't think the 17 existed back then. 20.7 or something like that, because we couldn't get far back enough. But and this is probably a little bit longer lens. But otherwise, I usually shoot the scene on one lens, because I always feel like when you change the lens, it just suddenly feels like you're in the middle of the scene. Like, let's say you go from a 27 to a 77 or something. It feels like you're putting on like binoculars or like glasses throughout it just takes me out. And it takes me out of the character's perspective. Unless I'm on a close-up, and I'm shooting a POV that's something I need to see very far away. But it's, let's say, two people talking. I'm a big believer in that both sides feel the same, that they're almost like to a tape measure, that it's the same distance, that it's the same lens, just really same feeling throughout the scene and throughout the entire movie. In fact, I would probably think that we shot this movie 90% on the 37 and then maybe go a bit wider to the 20.7 for the wide shots, or maybe to a 14 or something. And then for some looks, because there's so many different looks, and maybe go to up to a 57, but not longer. I don't like long lenses so much. I really like, especially when shooting close-ups, I like being with the camera very much in the actor's space, up close and personal.
This report is entirely mendacious. It would never have seen the light of day if you...
So now we have a scene here with John Lithgow where he falls apart. This is the second person to fall away in the race, like one of the front runners. And it's again one of those scenes where you have to give space. We tried different performances, and John obviously is such a experienced actor, but it was complicated, all these extras that usually don't speak English, so they don't know what's going on. This is all in Italy. Again, a new location, a kitchen on a military base, because I like this in general. I like this sort of to go against what you think is the ornate life in the Vatican and to go simple and stark and militaristic in a way. Yeah? So this is a military canteen. And I just like that instead of like having sculptures and I guess I'm a Protestant. That's why I thought like this is more appropriate. But in fact, if you look at Casa Santa Marta, it's probably closer to this than an ornate Catholic location.
He was concerned that the sister from my order that made that regrettable scene might have been brought to Rome with the deliberate...
This was a complicated scene to shoot. We probably had a day, which isn't much. It's a big performance by John Lithgow and a big performance by Isabella. This is her only speech. And I'm so happy because during the screening in Telluride in Toronto, during the premieres, the movie just premiered past September. Here, she does this curtsy, and the audience broke out in applause because they were so on her side. And that was wonderful to feel that they just love her performance and they love her vengeance. They love that John Lithgow gets his comeuppance and that she gives it to him and that she demounts this group of men. Everyone thinks like, when is she going to say something? And she finally does. And I think it felt like a big release in the audience. This gets a laugh from Sergio again. His smoking, his vaping. It seems to be very popular, and I love it because it's so irreverent. He doesn't care. He just does his thing, and that's his strength.
Seems that we're running out.
Again, a nice quiet scene between Stanley and Rafe. And see the St. Peter's in the background and that red building above their heads? Again, we're not cutting much in this scene, very slow pace, like in most scenes, yeah, and just holding the shot forever in a wide shot, just letting it be. That's very much 1970s conspiracy thriller, not using shots twice. But what I wanted to say is the wide shot, that wasn't there. So that's CG just put in because it's their garden. And there's no St. Peter's there. So just to locate it more in the Vatican, we put that in, we put the church in. It didn't feel Vatican enough, this location.
To tell you to examine.
You'll notice, I think in this scene again, I used only every shot once. And that's, to me, really important, that don't go back and forth all the time. Don't cover every line. Just use the shots. I mean, here, this close-up is the first time we're on this close-up because he's asked how he wants to be called as Pope. And he says, John. And it's an important moment because he accepts his candidacy and that he should be Pope. From all his doubt in the beginning, he suddenly has this moment of reckoning, thinking, maybe I should do this. Maybe I should do this job. Maybe God wants me to have this position. And here he has, again, a moment of doubt, thinking, my God, I can't vote for myself. But then he sees Sergio, the conservative, the guy who basically wants to undo everything that his big idol, the previous pope, did. And he says, well, I don't have a choice. I got to vote for myself. And as you notice, it's a big moment, so it all gets its own shot. You just need to shoot that to make it clear, to make whatever is going on in Rafe's head, make that clear. So that's terrorist attack from outside. There's a car bomb exploding. And again, that's all CG. You saw that wide shot with a broken window up there. We had a big dust cannon, or 2 or 4, I forget how many, up on big rafters, on big rostrums on the right, and just blasted them into the room with dust and little foam pieces that look like brick or glass, rubber basically, so that no one can get hurt. And I think we shot it twice, because the first explosion was actually didn't look impressive enough, and that was pain because you have to reset everything. 120 cardinals get cleaned up, and the carpet gets cleaned up, and the cannon gets refilled, and it's a bit difficult to understand if it works because that window isn't there, that entire wall isn't there, and the sunlight that comes in through the window isn't there. So you just simulate that light on the back wall and everything, and it just didn't feel real enough the first take. So we did the second take, and the second take is in the film, and it was important to redo, even if it took us probably 3 hours to reset everything. And that is a lot on a tight shooting schedule. So again, this is a scene where Sergio just speaks Italian, and I love that because I think we planned this in English, but then hearing him in English, he just didn't, it's not his language. You take the main tool of the actor away, you just keep listening to the accent and not to the scene. And so I said, like, well, let's do it in Italian. It just feels much more real. And there was a lot of doubt from everyone because of subtitles and everything, but it's just like felt right, and now everyone's happy. I think everyone's favorite new discovery is Sergio Castellito because he's just so authentic. And that's the Italian. And it made Rafe speak more Italian and so forth. Where else are we such an international community but in the Vatican? They come from all over the world, and they have, 50 different languages, and Italian unites them. So this is Sergio's comeuppance. He basically loses the confidence of everyone. And now we have finally Carlos Diaz's big appearance. So he's from Mexico originally, lives in Vancouver. We discovered him after a long, long casting process. And this is actually, it's the first time that ever happened to me, by the way. I got a call when the film was locked and done. And everything was mixed. And I got a call that said, we have $400,000 left over from Italy. Is there anything you want to do, want to shoot? And it's a wonderful opportunity when you think you've the movie done and think like, and the movie's never done. It's never going to be as good as you thought it could be. You always think like you might be content and the audiences might like it. And that's great. But I move on to the next one because I think, next time I want to do this. Next time I want to have more time for that. Or next time I want to... Whatever that is, it's little details. And in this case, what had happened is the world had changed after our shooting because of the attacks in Israel. And just the world felt differently. And I felt slightly that the speech, whatever Carlos says here, what we gave him, needed to, we don't want to reference that because it has nothing to do with the movie. It's much too big a topic to cram into this movie, but somehow the attitude, the feeling had changed. And so we needed to somehow rewrite the scene. And also I felt that Carlos, because Sergio had spoken Italian, the original speech we had shot was Carlos in English. But because he's Mexican and he feels more at home in his language, in his native language, I mean, I'm speaking English right now. That's not my mother tongue, and it's more complicated to me than German. If I were an actor, you take away my core. And so we rewrote the scene. Peter rewrote the scene, Peter Strawn, and we reshot only that close-up. Carlos's close-up where he delivers his speech. Everything else is from before. We reshot that and in Spanish, and it just feels more natural. And also, just for that speech to land more, those shots that you just saw of the cardinals gathering and the nuns walking while we were at it, while we were there in Rome, spending that money that we had left over, miraculously found in the budget, we shot those shots just to give it a bit more time to let the speech sink in. This shot is a crowd duplication shot. I think we had 30 extras here. As I said, we didn't have enough money. So just to think that we shot this in like 4 or 5 passes or even more. We had the left side with cardinals, and then it's a lock-off shot, so you can do that. Left side of cardinals, shooting them walking, the center, shooting them walking, and the right side. And then another plate with just rain. And that's sort of basically a combined shot. And it's obviously more cardinals than fit into this room. But again, reality, I don't think you question it. And reality to me doesn't, the real reality, I'm not so interested in that. I'm more interested in the emotional impact of that. And that shot was important to me, that it felt right. There's a shot coming up of a window. I didn't have that for the longest time in the edit because I was worried, because obviously we didn't have that element. This is all real on stage, but that doesn't exist. We didn't build this because it would cost millions to build that. So that POV, just with that breath of fresh air coming in, just imagine they've been sequestered forever. Now there's a new election coming. There was a speech, sort of a poetic equivalent of everyone being touched by some kind of Holy Spirit, if you want to put it highbrow. So what is that? A POV out of an open window. Everyone hearing sort of birds and wind. And everyone hearing that at the same time. So we shot that just to, again, somehow try to find an image for things that we can't quite grasp. And so that was important to me. And that cost a lot of money because it doesn't exist. It was, if I shot up there, it would have been all blue screen and light, and the rafters on the ceiling. This is all CG. That's what I wanted to say earlier. Wildside, our Italian partner, they didn't only have the set that is built, but also the digital asset they had built for the young Pope. So we were able to pay a license fee and buy that asset and sort of make it better because this is theatrical, it's not TV, and technology has evolved since the young Pope. I love the crack in the glasses of John Lithgow, by the way. I think it might have even been his idea, just to, at least the sitting, that he stayed seated, that he's sort of this broken man. That's definitely John's idea. Obviously, big moment here in the movie. A new pope is being elected, and he's accepting. So I guess that's good news. And also means the movie's coming to an end. Not quite. There's a final twist waiting, among many twists. I like these hard sound cuts. Obviously, the clapping, we took one shot further. If you take it literally, you would have to cut it off with a wide shot. But I just like these slightly off, different hard sound edits or different transitions to make a movie more interesting, to basically wake an audience up. And I get awake when I go like, oh, what was that? That was different. That was new. I didn't see that coming. And so little things like extending the clapping over that insert makes, first of all, the insert more interesting, because I'm thinking, like, why is there still clapping? And then the cut to the next shot when we're basically in the next scene, more interesting.
Than I would ever have done.
I should have told you this morning when I found out. But
I think this was the first shot we shot in the movie. And I think Rafe was a bit irritated that we didn't cover it. It was just this shot, just a wide shot. And I remember he just walked in and had this thick robe on and was a little bit nervous. First day on set, was a bit worried about, and then I'm only shooting this one shot where there's silhouettes in front of a window. The good news was here, after that, we shot him sort of with a wound in his face. And on that shot, on the wide shot, we didn't have the wound yet because we hadn't thought of it. He had just been in an accident and somehow we just didn't put it on. And I'm very glad that we put the wound on afterwards for the next scenes, because it just gives him a certain vulnerability and a certain physicality also of the attack. So this is a big, big scene. This is Carlos's big scene. He obviously didn't have too much dialogue until he's a quiet observer in the background, very much like Rafe. And now he has to reveal who he is and who he's always been. And we rehearsed it before on a Sunday. Rafe and him just sitting quietly in a room, going over the lines, discussing each line. And you have to imagine, he's never been in a movie. He's an actor. He's had training, but he's never been in a movie. He has a different job. He's an architect. But his dream is this. And he was wonderful in the film and wonderful to work with. But I could imagine it is pretty intimidating coming to a set and then working with Stanley and Isabella and Rafe and John and Lucien and Sergio, all these people, all these career actors who've done it for 40 years, basically. And Carlos just stood his ground, and he delivered the scene beautifully, very sensitively. It was important for me that you look into his face while he says these lines and you believe the past that he's telling you. But that you don't also see it from the beginning, that you look at him and go like, oh yeah, I mean, there's something more complex to this character. He needed to be just a normal guy, just one of us. But when you tell us the story, you kind of look at him and go like, oh yeah, I can imagine. That makes sense. And that was only Carlos that was able to do that. I'm very grateful to how he sort of abandoned himself into this role and into the film, handed himself over and dedicated his life to it during the shooting.
It seemed to me more of a thing to change his handiwork.
There's a shot coming up at the very end that was inspired just like the overhead shot with the umbrellas. Again, stressing how important collaboration is and inspiration among crew members. The umbrella shot, the overhead shot, came in a conversation with Lizzie, my costume designer. She said, what if it rains and they all have white umbrellas? And I immediately thought, oh, that would look great from above. And a sea of cardinals with white umbrellas, not black umbrellas, but just white. Usually umbrellas are black or blue or whatever, but just white umbrellas. It just felt different and interesting. And so we looked for a location where we could do that shot with the white umbrellas. And then we didn't have enough cardinals and we duplicated them, as a crowd duplicated them, as I mentioned earlier. And there's one shot in the very end, which I'll tell you about when it comes. This was also inspired from location scouting because I saw turtles in the garden of the Vatican. And I just liked that image. They obviously weren't running around like that, but I found this to be weird and interesting. And so I put it there. But in the garden, there were just turtles there and a fountain. And so we put the turtles in the movie. And then here, we're not showing the white smoke because we're just hearing it. It felt to me more interesting. Everyone knows what the white smoke looks like. And it just felt more interesting to me on Rafe's face. And we already saw the black smoke. So it just kind of felt like it was a given that he would be seeing or hearing the crowd with white smoke. And anyway, Rafe's not seeing it, so I didn't want to shoot it. I always shoot empty rooms when I make a movie. I like it. I could just take the actor out and just shoot it empty. Now, this is always a big moment for me, the opening of the windows after they close in the beginning. Suddenly, Rafe's at the end of this journey, light comes back in, and life comes through the open window, basically back to life. And now this is the shot I wanted to talk to you about again. I saw a picture. Either Lizzie, costume designer, or Susie Davis, the wonderful production designer, showed it to me. Forget which one. Let's have both have them the credit of 3 nuns in white walking through Rome, like an old-fashioned picture through an alleyway. And I immediately thought that would be a great last shot. Just the future is white and the future is female and the future is fresh air and everything. And then so we put it in the film. So that was the end of it. Thank you so much for listening. I hope I was able to share some details from the film that are interesting to you. I hope you enjoyed the movie, and thank you so much for listening, and we'll see each other soon again, I hope.